Welcome, climate viewers. It's Jim Lee from ClimateViewer News and weathermodificationhistory.com here with Augustus Doricko from Rainmaker Technologies.
Rainmaker Technology Corporation, yeah.
Okay, so you've no doubt heard by now that there have been over 50 casualties as a result of flooding in Texas. There's a lot of people making a lot of speculation on the internets, and I'd like to basically dig into that because it's getting kind of weird out there on the internets. So let's just jump to an accusation. I'm gonna bring up another one as a matter of fact because it was in my I think even the Hodge twins got in on this.
I saw that.
You saw that one too. Let me see if I can pull that up real quick. And a lot of people are throwing around my stuff going, it's true, it's true, it's true. Well, we're going to unpack that. And I want to go ahead and say, and I think that you would agree with me on this. This is not to downplay any of what happened. It's a tragedy what happened in Texas. This is a serious topic. Okay. Anytime there's a loss of life, you got to take it seriously. And at the same time, I think that, having a serious discussion about it and not just being, overly flamboyant, clickbait titles are going to come out. You're going to see a whole lot of these, probably all damn weekend long. But I want to get it from the horse's mouth. That's the way I always have. I've always operated that way. I'd rather have a frank discussion with the people being accused, and then we'll decide what happens after that, and I'm not even seeing it now. Like there's so many people hitting me up, asking me, what do I think about this right now? And I'm like, well, you know what? I'll give you an answer later. And I really appreciate you agreeing on such short notice to do this. And guys, full disclosure, I was like, you want to do this tonight or tomorrow afternoon? He's like, how about tonight? I was like, okay, we're doing this tonight.
I mean, it's important to talk about this stuff, and I appreciate you giving the opportunity to talk about it, especially with all of the people that I think have concerns that I sympathize with, even if I think that we have some pretty straightforward answers to them.
Yeah, I can agree with that. So I'm not seeing it now. Like it's my timeline's flooded with Marjorie Taylor Greene. Like I'm literally trying to scroll, and go ahead, everybody, blame me for not having this up and ready. Well, screw them. I got the other one. Let's just go to that. All right, so I'm going to share the screen up real quick, and we'll hop over here. Boom. So what do we have? We've got General Michael Flynn. I'd love to see the response at Augustus Doricko, and Rainmaker Corp for public accountability. Can you confirm with full transparency whether, the time and location of any seeding activities, blah, 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 blah. Whether any contracts, public or private, were active in Kerr County? I think we've already got the answer to that is no. Given the deadly consequences and ongoing speculation about the potential role of weather modification, the public is owed a full transparency, factual clarity. And that's what we're going to try to provide tonight. Okay. There are a lot of people who will want to just immediately want me. They just want to see me beat you up. You're not going to get that. Like, I don't see the world as black and white. Everything's shades of gray. I'd rather have a, honest, fact-based conversation about this. And, I am going to poke you in the ribs some. I think that you're a strong guy. You can take it. Those who don't understand how this works. So in Texas specifically, they have the Texas Department of Licensing and Regulation. In order to modify weather in Texas, you must apply with this organization and obtain a license in order to modify weather in Texas. This is in addition to the federal requirements, which are from the Weather Modification Reporting Act of 1972. You can find out more information about this on weathermodificationhistory.com. Simply go to the interactive timeline, and you can just pop in here, and you can divide it up by weather, geoengineering, weather modification, space weather modification, all that fun stuff. But all the way back here, 1972, we had the Weather Modification Reporting Act of 1972. This is the requirement that, people actually tell the federal government, NOAA specifically, and the Department of Commerce. This is Public Law 92205, and this is originally from the original NOAA magazine, proposed weather modification reporting regulations published, and now you must be reported to NOAA. So these are the original documents. This came as a result of basically after the Vietnam War, we did Operation Popeye, weather warfare over Vietnam. There was reporting in the New York Times that we had done this Operation Popeye. This led to a whole bunch of bald white guys in Washington, D.C. going, we can control the weather? Question mark. So they immediately started passing laws, this being one of the very first one, then the Weather Modification Policy Act of 1976, followed up by the Environmental Modification Convention. The weather warfare ban in 1978 was ratified. So that's pretty much all the laws that are governing this sort of thing. The weather warfare ban does not ban any kind of benevolent weather modification or intentional weather modification within your own borders. So countries can do whatever they want as long as their weather doesn't go screwing with some other country. That could cause a lot of conflict. Now, Augustus, he owns a company. How you started up last year, right?
2023.
2023, that's right. And that is available at rainmaker.com. So what Augustus did was he responded to this accusation here. And, I'm going to throw this in the chat for everybody. You guys can read it yourself. And I'm going to shoot that out to y'all now. All right, there you go. There's the chat link for everybody watching at home. So basically, you want to explain what you got here?
Yeah, sure. So first and foremost, right, like I think it's worth saying what our company is, what we do. Rainmaker is a next-gen cloud seeding company. Our interest is in where there are droughts, where times are too dry and farms are going dry or reservoirs are running out, helping to produce water for those constituencies, farms, ecosystems, utilities, that sort of thing. I think that a lot of people, rightfully so, hear about that and think off the jump, well, did you cause flooding? Can you cause flooding? Did Rainmaker cause flooding in Texas? And first of all, categorically and absolutely no. And we can examine all of the evidence that demonstrates that there was no way that we could have participated in causing any of the flooding there. That said, it was a tragedy that it did happen. And I think there's a lot of things that the country can do differently to try to mitigate disasters like that in the future. And I think there's a lot of things that we can regulate differently so that people have less concerns about weather modification activities writ large. And so in that thread, originally somebody asked, can you disclose where you were operating in Texas, what you were doing in Texas, and if you had any impact on the tropical storm Barry that blew through. And again, that storm, just to go through the timeline of events, right? The National Weather Service on the 3rd at about 1 a.m. Posted a severe flood risk, right? Then the subsequent day at about 4 a.m, they announced that there was a high probability of life-threatening flooding. That was from the convergence of two different extremely moist systems, one coming up from the Gulf, one coming up from the Pacific. And Rainmaker did not operate on the 3rd. On the 4th, we operated for about 20 minutes, days in advance, and seeded a cloud that dissipated after 2 hours, and then suspended all operations indefinitely because there was risk of flooding. And so after our 20-minute operation, which was flown at about 2,500 feet, where we only dispersed about 60 grams of silver iodide aerosol, we stopped operating, and those aerosols could not have persisted for the days that came afterwards. And
were you using the typical like ice flares, or were you using your proprietary system?
We were using silver iodide aerosol.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it wasn't like the ice flares brand, flare sticks or anything like that.
We don't use ice crystal engineering. No.
Okay. Cool. So I'm going to give you guys a little visual of where we're talking about, just to, bring things home. So I went into Google Earth and I kind of overlaid this here. So you were down here on July 2nd.
Mm-hmm.
So this is 2 days in advance. Let me actually take this off the screen. That way it'll make it a little clearer for everybody. So on July 2nd, we're down here in Rungi. You say, is that how you pronounce it?
Yep.
So down here in Rungi, Texas, you're at about, you said 1,500 to 2,600 feet.
Mm-hmm.
Now, for those who don't understand, you know, like, okay, if you're in, I don't know what the fuck a kilometer is because I'm an American. So you guys can do the math on that. You know, for all my viewers in other countries, y'all can check that out. But specifically at 2,600 feet, you're talking about a very low residence time. What would you surmise that, you know, how long those chemicals would last in the atmosphere at 2,600 feet?
Yeah, I mean, I guess the first thing to say, right, is that if you disperse about 60 grams of those, which we did, that's a pretty radically de minimis amount. That amount of material, it would have a hard time even inducing precipitation in a single convective cumulus cell, let alone any large scale system like what we saw in the succeeding days. At 2,600 feet, you're not going to get anything that persists in going around the globe. Especially after precipitation. Those clouds dissipated about 2 hours after seeding, and then would be immeasurably small and inconsequential 2-3 hours after seeding.
Yeah, so I'm gonna just show the satellite for those who weren't there, didn't really catch what was going on. So for those who don't know, Tropical Storm Barry had already, broken up over Mexico. This is the remnants of it we're seeing here. This is on, if you're on Earth.Null School, you can see right here, I have it up at 2200 local. That is, Eastern. I could throw UTC, but again, America. So as you can see, right here, I've got it, at 1,000 hectopascals. It's 1,000 millibars. It's roughly ground level. We're talking about a moisture flow going up from the north, from the southeast to the northwest. So this is the direction that the wind is blowing. And this, you can see, is total precipitable water. So this is just saying how much water was up there, and was this, a prime opportunity? Clearly, on the second, we're looking at a lot of water that, could be rained out, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. An ahistoric amount. It was like a 1 in 100 year flood.
Yeah. So then when we skip forward, now we're on the third, and then we're on the fourth. We're not, this is the third in the evening. Now you can see the wind has severely picked up compared. Okay. We're up to 18 kilometers. I don't, what's a kilometer? Miles per hour. So, if we just back up just a bit, we got 10 miles an hour, and they're all kind of all over the place. But then we get this, really quick picking up of all of the airs moving mostly north. And it's really pulling all of that water in that's going to rain out. And this is actually the third at around midnight. And then we get to the fourth. We're still seeing the same kind of, flow rates. Same thing over here on the Cocoras. If you actually, this is rainfall levels in the lakes and streams. This is right now I'm looking at on the second. You can see down here in Brownsville, we got some reds. We've got we've got an orange right here. Still not very high, 2.10 inches, but when we go to the third, you can see that we've got, some increased rainfall here, clearly. But the fourth is when you actually start to see the flooding. And then followed up by the fifth, this is the majority of the flooding occurred in this area right here. So some people would say, well, bro, dude, man, you were here and all the flooding happened here and the wind was going this way. What's your reaction to that?
We were operating days in advance at sufficiently low altitudes such that particulate, which again was like less than you could fit in the palm of your hand, would not have made it even that far north over the course of 2 days, right? Like that amount of aerosol would have been immeasurable and entirely ineffective by the time that precipitation really did come in force from Tropical Storm Barry.
Yeah, and just I'm going to do a real quick measurement on this to give people an idea. If I'm looking at the map right now, just to give you guys an idea, because I'm one of them nerds. Okay, we're talking about 108 miles, roughly, and the flooding actually occurred up here, and then it ran down the streams to accumulate at Lake Travis. So we're actually talking, roughly 150 miles up to Mason. So I don't see how something at 2,600 feet is going to make it, or, even with convection, lifting, let's say what do you say, 50 milligrams?
50 to 65 grams.
Yeah. So 65 grams of chemicals, even if there was major convection and it was all thrown way up into the air, that still seems highly unlikely to cause I read somewhere like 20 something inches of rain in a day. Like,
not just highly unlikely, Jim, like physically impossible.
It's like statistically impossible. This is, and for the haters, because I know you're going to come at me, bro. I don't, facts do not give a fuck about your feelings on this one. So for anybody who wants to hate on Jim Lee for, talking to a weather modification guy, you guys know how I feel about weather modification. Augustus knows how I feel about it. I freaking hate 99% of weather modification people. Why? Because they lie, cheat, steal, they obfuscate. Hell, I've called Weather Modification Incorporated and ice flares, asked them for material safety data sheets, flight plans, things like that. They just hang up on you. They won't have a conversation. You got big balls, my man. So kudos for that. And you've been pretty damn transparent.
Well, I mean, I appreciate that. And, where it's coming from my perspective is like, I live in California. I used to live in Texas. I've seen firsthand what happens when farmers run out of water, right? Like I've been to Salt Lake City and I can see how far the lake has receded and all of the dead birds along the lake bed because there isn't enough water there, right? Like I've heard stories of people in Phoenix, Arizona getting their water shut off at their houses because there's not enough there. And so if there is a way for us to produce more water and we can scientifically show where it's happening, what the effect is, that the materials that we're using are entirely safe, then I think that we should be doing that for the sake of those farms and ecosystems and residences. And people, rightfully so, ask questions about what the consequences are, what materials you're using, if it's safe. And if I was being discreet or clandestine about this, then it would just make people more skeptical. And so I'm persistently trying to be as transparent as possible. But I also don't think it should just be me proactively being communicative about what we're doing. Like, I think that the fact that we haven't had an update to our weather modification regulations in the United States in decades is ridiculous, right? Like, we should absolutely have more transparent reporting requirements from the federal agencies. We should have approved materials lists. We should have approved concepts of operations. We should require that you have certified meteorologists on staff. So it's not just anybody that is allowed to do this. And I think that certain states do have pretty good permitting and regulatory structures right now, but the federal government should absolutely be involved.
So this is something that we previously discussed in an X space. And, I knew inherently that you would say yes to this. And I think that a lot of your competitors, Western Weather Consultants, Desert Research Institute, these guys don't want to talk about this sort of stuff. Like they want to make their money. Idaho Power Company, they want to make their money. They want to have their little, cut out and make sure that, they keep making claims and then not having to prove that they did a damn thing. I do think that you have a very novel approach, with the dual polarization radar at looking at the structure of water versus ice. Great interview. What's the guy's name?
Sean
Ryan. Pretty good interview on there. It probably, I would ask a lot of questions that Sean didn't. Let's be specific about that. But still pretty, awesome, interview. The thing that we're really kind of hinging on here is that most people don't understand that literally when we're talking about the Weather Modification Reporting Act, this has been modified pretty heavily. Like originally, you only had to fill out, an initial report. Let me go back. Actually, this is your initial report on weather modification, and it just gives you general areas. What do you plan on doing? How long do you plan on doing it? And then they have what's called, this is a NOAA Form 17-4. And then you got the 17-4A, which is your interim activity reports and final reports. And in that, they literally just want you to fill out number of modification days. What were you doing? Were you trying to make it rain? Were you getting rid of hail or fog? I don't know. There's a lot in the other category. Were you doing airborne or ground? There's ground-based cloud seeding generators. There's airplanes, drones, that sort of thing. And what, type and amount of chemicals, agents used. A lot of this stuff, it's just very broad brush. A good example of that would be that we have the ground-based cloud seeding generators that operate in the Rocky Mountains. They operate pretty much October through March of every winter. So they do orographic cloud seeding with snowpack augmentation. The problem with that is they never say when they're turning them on. So this is one of the things that, I always speculate about, and that's all we can do is speculate about it because there is a complete lack of transparency. So what I proposed to you in the X space was, would you be willing to use, like, say, all right, let's be blunt, people. Under the Biden administration, there was a Department of Homeland Security app where if I was an illegal immigrant and I wanted to come into the country, I could punch some buttons into an app and have a border patrol person meet me to escort my ass into the country. But we don't have an app for weather modification reporting. Mm-hmm. And with NOAA's budget, whether it's being cut or not, maybe they should make a little room in their budget for actually just throwing together an app that says, okay, you've now submitted your initial report. Now, would you please report when you were modifying the weather, where you did it, what was your flight path, what was your altitude, what was the, grams, pounds, whatever, chemical agent you used. Did you just electrify some water? Were you using cloud ionizers? Were you shooting laser beams? We need to know these things. I think that the public, since we don't get a participation, in the discussion of whether or not these things occur, we should at least be informed on when they occurred. And this would not only benefit the public, it would benefit the scientists, it would benefit the forecasters, and it definitely would lay the groundwork for, does your shit work or not? Mm-hmm. Are you actually causing chaos? Is there a butterfly effect? The more information that we have, the more granular the information we have on weather modification activities, the more likely we are to be able to say, beyond a shadow of a doubt, this person did something that ended up affecting someone in a negative way. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, 100%. And I think I have two thoughts on that off the jump, right? I think that no matter what Rainmaker does to be proactive about our reporting, right? Like, absolutely NOAA should participate in the regulation of this or some other authority within the federal government. Because if we're just putting stuff out and it isn't regulated, then why would you trust us? You should trust and verify, right? I'll continue to try to be transparent, but I also want some third party.
Yeah, real quick on that. So, like, when you put the tweet out, for those full transparency, I texted, Augustus, and I'm like, dude, so basically your version of events is trust me, bro. I mean, do you like being in this situation where it is literally trust me, bro?
No, there should absolutely be a third party regulator that can verify what we're saying, right? And I think not only is that important for our own operations so that we know what the consequences are, not only is it important for public transparency, right? But if you look at China, right, this is something that I only learned recently. They've had for the past few years a $300 million annual budget for their weather modification program, right? Yep. 38,000 employees, 2 universities that offer degrees in weather engineering. Well, that recently got up to a $1.4 billion budget for weather modification across the country within the Chinese Meteorological Administration. And so if we don't have actual regulations, actual reporting requirements from the federal government about this technology, then who's to say what's going on from American actors versus otherwise within the US? I don't think that there's anything internationally clandestine going on right now, but it should be investigated and regulated. And that's something crazy for a company to proactively say, right? Like, well, why would a company want to be more regulated? And I think that it's like, because on the one hand, it will be better for my business and for the science if there is third-party validation. But also, if we don't do that, then actually there may be negative consequences that are going on from malicious actors that we otherwise wouldn't be aware of. And so if we can have more strict regulation, like the spirit of MTG's bill, I'm not necessarily opposed to, although I think it's really poorly constructed if it's going to be anything like Florida's SB 56.
I haven't read it yet. I'm withholding judgment until I actually read the terminology on there. And if it turns out that they're trying to ban clouds again, and they're calling it geoengineering and weather modification, but it's really chemtrails, then I'm going to be pissed off, and you're all going to hear it. So just know that's coming. But yeah, I totally agree with you on that.
Yeah, my suspicion is that they're probably going to lump together cloud seeding, solar radiation management, and also chemtrails all in one big, beautiful bill, let's say. And we'll see what can come from that. But, like, I guess it's also probably worth touching on real briefly, just for anybody that is listening that doesn't know already, like there is something called solar radiation management or stratospheric aerosol injection, which is a totally different technology than cloud seeding, which is something that Rainmaker doesn't do at all. SAI, or SRM, is the injection of reflective particles into the upper atmosphere, into the stratosphere, to nominally cool the planet down. Should that be regulated differently than cloud seeding? Yeah, absolutely. Should that be studied more because it's not something that has been deployed at scale like cloud seeding? Yeah, absolutely. But they're really not the same, and they shouldn't be treated as such. Like, cloud seeding is a water supply tool that has localized short-term effects and can be turned off whenever you want.
And I think this is an important point because most people don't understand the difference. I just recently released a new website called chemtrailfacts.com, specifically about this. So you guys can come over there and check out this nice little beautiful infographic my friend Dominic made for me. And on it, it gives you, you got a height scale over here on the side to give you kind of an idea. We live in the troposphere. This is where all weather occurs on the planet. And then up here in the stratosphere, this is where the ozone layer is. It's a whole different animal. Okay, less turbulence, less convection, less. It's drier. It's a little bit warmer. Whereas it gets colder and wetter as you go up in altitude till you hit the tropopause, which is the dotted line, which varies greatly. Okay, so we're talking anywhere from 39. I've seen it as high as 60,000 feet. Like right off of Key West, Florida. So the tropopause is constantly fluctuating. So the difference between stratosphere and troposphere is the tropopause. Stratospheric aerosol injection does not create clouds. Cloud seeding, weather modification activities do not create clouds. These are just facts. Yes, there are videos of the J2X doghouse rocket creating clouds. Okay. Yes. When you burn fuel that makes water and then it turns into a cloud, and a dude from the BBC shows a cloud coming out of a rocket. Yeah, that happened, but that doesn't mean that on a daily basis, that, people are just creating clouds willy-nilly. Wet surface air coolers from nuclear power plants create clouds. Coal-fired power plants, they create clouds. Why? Massive amounts of moisture going into the air, hitting cloud condensation nuclei. If you guys don't understand these terms, then you clearly haven't been to weathermodificationhistory.com. Go there, go to the frequently asked question page, and read about weather modification. Know the difference between that and geoengineering. Stratospheric aerosol injection, geoengineering, solar radiation management does not create clouds. Cloud seeding, like Augustus does not create clouds. It creates rain. You have to have a cloud in order to create that rain. So basically, he's adding chemicals to a cloud so that more water vapor condenses on these cloud condensation nuclei so they get heavy enough to fall on the ground. Now, there is a chance that in certain situations, you can overseed a cloud. And this has been done in the past intentionally. Good example, 2008, the Beijing Olympics. The Chinese said they didn't want any rain on their bird's nest Olympic stadium. Mm-hmm. They failed miserably. So, yeah, they had a big budget, and yeah, they were shooting rockets. They were spraying liquid nitrogen into the clouds. There are plenty of videos of people getting soaking ass wet inside that stadium. So this is not an exact science. I don't know that it ever will be. Maybe, with AI and new sensor data, we'll be able to get that granular detail and be able to say, okay, now we can, strategically just, pinpoint accuracy. But when you're talking about weather modification projects, the scale of which, I don't think people really can appreciate when you actually see it on a map. Like for me, maps kind of change the game. So I'm going to bring up, this is ClimateViewer 3D. And this is just the ground-based cloud seeding generators in America. So these are in the Colorado, all through Colorado. And if you look real close, you can see that they're all right along mountaintops. You know what I mean? They're the base of mountains. Orographic cloud seeding basically, uses the wind. It's called orographic lift. This is in Nevada. I just got a map for Utah, which I need to fill them in. Utah's got a bunch as well. This is Idaho Power Company. These are where their racetracks are for their planes. These are the ground-based cloud seeding generators. And then you can see the original sources for these maps. For those who've never seen these kind of, technologies, this is what it looks like. We got the fancy version, which is, remote controlled solar panels and all of that. And then you got the redneck version where grandpa goes out, flicks his bic and lights an acetone container, and silver iodide goes up into the cloud on top of the mountain. So snowpack augmentation, like I said earlier, this is generally done from October through March in the wintertime every year. So if I come down here, these are those weather modification reports that go to NOAA. So you can actually just look at them real quick and get an idea. I'll pop this one up too. And you can see, like right here, it'll say, what Western Kansas Groundwater Management paid Western Kansas Groundwater Management to do hail suppression. And you can, get in here and look at some of these. Any of these mountaintop ones will say North American Weather Consultants, Gunnison County for snowpack augmentation, 3,000 square miles, November through December. So all of these happen in the winter. We don't get much information on them, but this has been going on since Irving P. Crick invented it in 1949. So Irving P. Crick invented the first cloud seeding generator from the ground. And this is right after 1946 when Vincent Schaefer, Irvin Langmuir, and Bernard Vonnegut invented cloud seeding. So cloud seeding's been around for over 80 years, yet all the scientific communities pretty much are in agreement that nobody's really been able to crack the code, be able to prove beyond a shadow of a doubt. But as you were saying with China is literally looking to put 100,000 cloud seeding generators on the entire Tibetan Plateau, because it basically, feeds all of the rivers that are going to flow off of this plateau. And that's why, Three Gorges Dam, that's why the Brahmaputra, that's why the fighting with India. So there's literally water wars going on between India and China right now over all this weather modification activity. When I spoke to James Roger Fleming, who's, one of the most prominent historians on weather modification, he said that weather modification on the scale that China was doing could classify as geoengineering, as something so large that it actually alters all weather on the planet. And then when you think about their budget plus the size of this thing, that's where we're talking about something where you're blurring the lines between weather modification and geoengineering, because weather modification is not geoengineering, but geoengineering definitely affects the weather on a worldwide scale. Mm-hmm. That's a track for you?
Yeah, no, that absolutely tracks, right? And I would say that, like in principle, right, I think that weather modification, if regulated and done cautiously as a way to produce more water or a better environment for people, for farms, for environments, that's great. In principle, geoengineering, like I don't advocate for now because I'm worried that it's not well understood enough and its consequences aren't well understood enough to deploy. But a lot of the concerns that people have about either of them, and I'm just seeing this in like the comment stream here as it comes in, a lot of the concerns come from like the notion of playing God, right? And that we ought not to play God because like we don't understand what the consequences are. We shouldn't mess with something that we don't understand, or the environment writ large. I actually think I have two sort of interesting pieces of perspective on this. For one, people say, well, like, don't mess with the weather, don't mess with the environment. We actually already change the environment all the time for humanity's interest and for the environment's interest, right? Like cloud seeding as a way to produce more water is analogous to building a dam on a river, right? Like God put the river in a particular place and we built a dam to modify the way that that water flows so that we can farm or put water in our cities. Cloud seeding is taking advantage of atmospheric rivers or clouds right above us and just bringing that water down in a similar way. And so not only is it something that I think is analogous to what we've done in the past, but also I think that, you know, like I'm a Christian. I was saved when I was 21. I'm really grateful for that. I think I'm still a sinner and not a perfect man, but like in Genesis 1:26 through 28, have you heard me talk about this before, Jim?
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
You actually kind of kicked me in the nuts with that one because I always used to say, let God control the weather, not man. And this is kind of like my pushback to, you know, just the reckless abandon with which we try to control all natural resources, whether it's air, water, land, you know, human resources, social engineering, shit. Every resource on the planet, we've screwed with it and we've screwed it up. So like for me, you know, being a Boy Scout, you know, being a Christian too, I was raised as a Lutheran, you know, from a very early age. My Boy Scout troop was at my Lutheran church. You know, I have a great appreciation for nature. And, you know, I always felt like it's just shrinking. It's just exponentially shrinking the natural places, you know, at least, you know, I live here in Sumter, South Carolina. So we're still very blessed. I like to tell people I live in the Garden of Eden. I mean, literally, I can dig a hole. It'll fill up with water. There's white-tailed deer, 12 of them in my front yard, you know, just, I mean, all the bugs, you know, none of the trees are dying like everybody's talking about. Bees everywhere and the skeeters. But, you know, I'd always say that, you know, let God control the weather, not man. And, you know, you brought up, you know, an interesting, you know, rebuttal to that directly from Genesis. And I was like, I understand, you know, we're supposed to be good stewards of that which God granted us. Please expand.
Yeah. Like at the beginning of time, right? One of the very first commandments that God gave us while we were still in the garden, before the fall, before sin, was to take dominion over and steward the earth, the seas, the skies, and everything therein, right? And so he told us to take care of creation, both for our sake and creation itself, to honor him. And as long as there are droughts, right? As long as there isn't enough water, as long as there is hail and severe weather, and we have the technology or could build the technology to take care of that, to steward the world and prevent those sorts of disasters from happening, then we're actually abdicating our responsibility to God by not deploying that. And so I think it, again, should be done cautiously and prayerfully. But if cloud seeding is a way to produce more water for the sake of creation and our interest, and God told us to take care of creation, then not doing it and depriving farms and ecosystems and people from having that water, I think is not fulfilling the mandate we were given in Genesis.
Yeah. And I agree with that now. You know, I'm still, you know, I still ride the fence on this because you know, I've seen so much, you know, bullshit, you know, just straight bullshit from the weather modification community. You remind me a lot of Chris Fallon. We talked about this briefly before we got it on, you know, on the air. For those who don't know, Chris Fallon was the former director of HARP. And, you know, I started doing this stuff around 2005. I really started, you know, talking publicly with my face around 2012. And up to that point, the military ran the HARP facility up in Alaska, and along, they sold it to the University of Alaska Fairbanks in 2015-ish, completed around 2016. And around I would say 17, 18, Chris Fallon was the director of HARP. And then here's a guy who just like out of nowhere is going, hey, everybody on Twitter, HARP's going to be on this weekend. We're going to be broadcasting on 5.8 megahertz. Tune in with your web SDRs or you ham radio operators. Let me know if you're picking up our signal. And then people from all over the freaking globe were like, I got you down here in South Africa, pretty weak signal, but I'm picking you up. And he's retweeting everybody's tweet. And I'm just like, who the fuck is this guy, man? Like, I've got to talk to this guy. And sure enough, he responded to me on Twitter and then eventually on emails. And eventually, we're texting each other like, I'm like, hey, is your freaking heater on? Because everybody's telling me you're steering a hurricane right now. I'm not picking you up on the web SDR, so you're clearly not on. He's like, no, we haven't been on. We got two towers down right now. We're rebuilding. So anyway, I thought that was really fascinating. Rest in peace, Chris T. Fallon. He passed away about a year and a half ago. But it was just such a monumental shift in transparency. You know what I mean? Going from the military to the U of A, and having a director just out there saying, look, man, we're flipping this thing on now and everybody, you can participate. You're like one of the first people that I've seen this. And I first heard of you in Tennessee. Want to talk about it?
Yeah, sure.
So the Tennessee chemtrail ban, Representative Monty Fritz proposed this, House bill to ban weather modification and geoengineering. So the first question I got to ask you is this, because this is, a lot of people know this, but most people don't. Weather modification in the United States, and I could bring the map up again and bore you guys to tears with how much I know about this. This is not about this. We're having a friendly conversation here. Weather modification in the United States can pretty much be divided down the Mississippi River. Mm-hmm. East of the Mississippi River, you're talking 20 to 30 years, since there's been any real active weather modification activities. Okay. But west of the Mississippi River, that's predominantly like 99.9% of weather modification activities. We're talking about cloud seeding. We're not talking about chemtrails here. We're not talking about geoengineering. We're talking about cloud seeding specifically. And this has been going on since, Project Skywater, when the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation, funded these experiments to put all of these ground-based cloud seeding generators up. So my question to you is, what kind of game were you playing with Tennessee and Florida when they literally haven't had a cloud seeding project? I mean, was it just about the idea that they wanted to ban something that could be helpful or necessary maybe in the future? Like,
yeah, I mean, so there are really two things, right? Like the first of which is that I don't want anybody in the United States, be they in Tennessee or Florida or Utah or California, not to have access to a technology that can help mitigate droughts. And people think about Florida and they think it's a really wet state. Well, 30,000 acres of Miami-Dade County burned down because of wildfire, because of drought in April of this year, right? Because they didn't have enough water. And so banning that technology and preventing, whether it's citrus farmers in Florida from having access to more water via cloud seeding, or the cattlemen in Tennessee from having more water due to cloud seeding, that just doesn't seem like something that is fair to those Americans. And so I wanted it for their sake. And also, like, there's my business interest in providing it, obviously. I'm not going to pretend that that's not part of it. But another reason
I support, I'm a big fan of capitalism. I'm not making any damn money doing this shit. I can tell you that. I do this. This is for my jollies, dude. Like, this is something I'm interested in. I do it as a public service, like if you appreciate what's going on, God bless you. Go over to connect.climateviewer.com and, subscribe to one of my shits. Send a donation. I would greatly appreciate it. But this is free of charge. This is my fun time. This is what I enjoy doing. I'm actually going to be a sheriff's deputy in like literally 2 weeks from now.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, I mean, I want to do cyber crimes. I want to hack high schoolers that think that they're little pretend keyboard warriors that can hide behind avatars and, harass 16-year-old girls and then lock their little asses up in DJJ. That sounds like a fun time to me. Um, but, oh God. Yeah, exactly, guys. It's always a shit show, and that's why we enjoy it. I literally I dressed up for this. I've got my Primus, Pussifer, and Perfect Circle t-shirt on. Took my daughter to her first concert ever, and she got to see them up in Charlotte. But so obviously, like when I first saw you, I was like, here's a guy who's literally just trying to get his name out. I mean, honestly, that was my first opinion. Like I'm like, this doesn't even make sense. It has been like 20, 30 years. Like, the guy's trying to make a name for himself, because I'd never heard of you before the Tennessee thing. And then you showed up in Florida, and I had people down there, and I'm like, go up to Augustus and tell him Jim said, what's up? Like punch him in the arm real quick. Just give him a little nut, maybe tug on his, on your hair, bro. Everybody talks about the hair, man. How are you in California with that hair?
Well, I mean, there's sort of like the Appalachian mullet, and then there's kind of like a tech bro mullet, probably, and
that's a thing.
Yeah, increasingly.
Okay, well, I who knew? We're spreading Southern culture all over the place.
Yeah, no, the South is like culturally preeminent right now in these days. So yeah, I mean, it's that. I guess one last quick point though on Tennessee, because you brought it up. Like, one, it's for the states themselves, but two, like, because Tennessee passed and because Florida passed, there's like a domino theory and concern associated where, my first concern was in all these Western states that do desperately need more water from cloud seeding right now. Like, if it passed on the East Coast, then it could on the West, and then immediately deprive like the really drought-ridden states and potentially get to the federal level. And then not only deprive all of the farmers that are currently relying on cloud seeding, but also make America less competitive in a domain that I think is going to be really consequential in the 21st century with China, who is investing, over $1 billion a year in weather mod.
And then we got the UAE, like, who's literally having like a contest every year. Yeah. Like, throwing out big checks. If you make it rain on the UAE, they will make it rain on you.
Yep. Yeah, but that's a lot of Chinese researchers that are being paid by the UAE to do that, right? Like,
yeah, like Linda Zhao with the graphene and the silicon dioxide nanoparticles. Yeah, I've covered some of that in the past. A lot of people, they miss the important stuff, like when it comes up, and then I'm going, yeah, we covered that like 2 years ago when it happened. But this is kind of like where I see things going, like, and I call this, in fact, I bet my left testicle on this. So this is kind of important that, the likelihood of these laws, and I was up to like 33 states with, tracking these. Ed, who's in the chat right now, one of my researchers at my Telegram chat, he was tracking them all on Legiscan, and we were looking at them and we're going, the likelihood that they're going to pass on the East Coast, like east of Mississippi, probably much higher. But I said I'm willing to bet my left testicle that not a single, state west of the Mississippi is going to ban weather modification. Why? So for those who don't understand why, Jim, am I advocating for weather modification? No, I really don't like the idea because, of its track record. However, unless you've got a better option for people who do not have water, if you want to run aqueducts down from Canada to feed all of the Western states who are constantly in a drought, there is no other option. So like as I age, I become a little more wise. I'm 48 now. When I started this, 15 years ago, I was like, ban all the things, like, like a lot of people you see, that are at, speaking at these things. I'm still completely in the ban the geoengineering thing. I don't think that it's necessary, and B, even if it is necessary, I think there are other technological innovations that if we do get to a place where the globe is warming excessively and, we're seeing, really deleterious effects of that. There are other technologies that can be employed other than blocking out the freaking sun, because I'm pretty sure that farmers don't want the sun blocked out. I'm pretty sure everything on the planet which is powered by the sun, all of God's creatures are powered by the sun. So I'm pretty sure we need that. And mold really likes dark, dim places and kills a whole lot of plants. So I don't think that there's no amount of arm twisting or framing of the debate where somebody could justify blocking out the sun, solar radiation management. It should be banned. And I liken it to the Oppenheimer argument. Robert Oppenheimer said, we thought that we would save more lives than we took by creating the nuclear bomb. And the same thing is going on right now, where you've got a guy like David Key saying many tens of thousands of people will die if we were to do a program like I want to, say, put 10 to 100 million tons of sulfur into the stratosphere. Now, we're not even talking about acid rain. It's already occurring from industrial sources, from aircraft, which is acid rain is, changing soil pH, lowering pH, more acidic ground, making more aluminum bioavailable. It's destroying trees. It's destroying crops. We've already got enough issues with sulfur, and these crazy SOBs want to do that. But I say that to say this. So with the weather modification, like I watched a documentary. I think it was called Owning the Weather. And it followed a family who lived in Texas. And I'm watching, the guy from the Weather Modification Association. I can't remember his name right now, but he was the president of it, and he's actually going to testify kind of like what you did. And, then they cut to this family, and what the son said really stuck with me. He said, my granddaddy bought this plane and started flying it to bring weather to people, to bring rain to people who didn't have any. And they're desperate for it. And then my daddy took over the job and he flew that plane. He said, it's my honor and my duty to fly this plane because there's so many people counting on me. So that really, I think that far too often we're guilty of dehumanizing people that we disagree with. So that's why, I really appreciate you coming on here and having this discussion, because I believe that, dehumanizing someone that we disagree with is the root of damn near every problem we have on the planet. I may disagree with weather modification. I can also see the good in what you're doing, because you are, you say you're committed to transparency. I'm going to hold your feet to the fire on that, because when we get the opportunity to go up there and rewrite this damn law and get the Weather Modification Reporting Act updated, I want to see you testifying there too, just as strongly as you did when you went to Tennessee and Florida. And I like the idea that you're committed to not using, these flares that, sorry, ICE engineering, which are loaded with ammonium perchlorate and aluminum predominantly, and less than 30% of the actual flare material that's going into the cloud is even the agent that they're wanting to put in there. So the fact that you're looking to, make your own aerosol generator that is going to use just the bare minimum, what's absolutely necessary to nucleate rain. I think that's also, a leap forward in, being more environmentally responsible. And you said that you were also working on some kind of new, even more. You want to even give us a hint?
Well, I think I'll just say briefly, right? Silver iodide, I think, is entirely safe to use given the concentrations that are used, right? 50 grams spread over hundreds of square miles, not kilometers, is of no consequence because it's almost immeasurably low. There's already 2 parts per million silver in American soil. So the amount that you're adding is like a million times less than what's already there. But I'm all for, even for the sake of people's concerns, whether they're scientifically founded or not, transitioning towards something that is biodegradable, more sustainable, totally averts any concern that they may have around the material that we're using. So we're thinking about that kind of stuff at Rainmaker right now.
So I want to venture a guess. So something like Pseudomonas syringae, something like a natural bacteria, For those that don't know, Pseudomonas syringae is a bacteria that forms clouds. In rainforests, we have trees that give off bacteria that form clouds. That's why they're called cloud forests. So there are so many different versions of natural cloud condensation nuclei, whether it's dust, molds, bacteria, mineral dust. There's so many different sources of potential cloud condensation nuclei. I always thought it was interesting that they came up with silver iodide, when Vincent Schaefer blew into a freaking refrigerator. And it's just like, let's sprinkle some of this in there. Oh, dry ice and silver iodide. Let's go rock a, tropical storm. Less than 11 months later, that didn't work out too well. But at the end of the day, like, I think that, your approach to this and, understanding that, you accept the failures of the industry, you acknowledge them. What are those failures you're talking about? I'm going to bring them up because I can't help myself. I wouldn't be honest with my people if I wasn't with you. So let's just hop through those real quick, and then we're going to pick on some chemtards. How about that? Because that's one of my favorite things to do. So over here on weathermodificationhistory.com, I'm on the weather modification page. Why? Because I break it into 3 categories. Chemtrails are not a thing, but weather modification, geoengineering, space weather modification, those are all things. They're verified. They're real. What is cloud seeding? You can learn all about it here. And does cloud seeding work? So this is one of the things that really got me. And it really got the Weather Modification Association as well, because in 2003, the National Research Council, Critical Issues in Weather Modification Research, said, although 40 years have passed since the first National Academy Science report on weather modification, this committee finds itself much in concurrence with the findings of that assessment 40 freaking years ago. We conclude initiation of large-scale operational weather modification programs would be premature because many fundamental problems must be answered first, and it's unlikely that that's going to happen anytime soon, which pissed off the Weather Modification Association, who then put out their own report saying, this is some bullshit. And then they tried very hard. They went through the Wyoming Weather Modification Pilot Program. They tried to prove there is scientific efficacy behind cloud seeding. They failed miserably on that. But this kind of goes to the, this statement right here, critical assessment of hygroscopic seeding of convective clouds and rainfall enhancement, goes to the argument of, well, you were in the area and you did cloud seed. Well, that basically successive development of more vigorous second, third, and fourth generation cells than those of unseeded clouds, that cloud seeding can lead to increased precipitation, more vigorous storms. What say you on that?
Yeah, so I think that there's 2 things here, right? The first was the 2003 report that you mentioned, which said something to the effect of like, well, how well does cloud seeding work? We don't know. I would not have started Rainmaker. I don't think that we could have in good faith started Rainmaker hadn't it been for Snowy and Cloud Lab, right?
Yeah.
These are 2 experiments that fundamentally changed the way in which you measure and validate what your effect is, right? By transitioning from using statistical validation, where you say, in seeded clouds versus unseeded clouds, we see this trend of effect, which gives you some information about what the effect of your seeding is.
But that's apples and oranges, right?
Well, exactly, right? Because like every cloud is so different. The staging is
unique,
so different. It is tough. But because of Snowy, where the National Center for Atmospheric Research and multiple other universities participated, and where they realized that if you have radar and you can differentiate between liquid and ice in cloud, and you fly in a zigzag, or if you fly in a known flight pattern and you only see precipitation in your flight track, then you can definitively attribute that to your intervention and say that's the anthropogenic precipitation. That is like the core innovation that enables Rainmaker to exist in all cloud seeding. And that's for glaciogenic orographic wintertime cloud seeding, right? For snowpack enhancement and to some extent, like late spring rains. In the case of convective seeding and warm seeding, it's much harder to get that sort of explicit validation. But that's something that we're doing active R&D on right now so that we can use radar to measure exactly how much water we're producing on an event by event basis.
So for those who don't understand convective, he's talking about updrafts, correct?
Yep.
I try to translate to redneck for people all the time because, you know, I sometimes I just get in my like science brain and I start using all the terms and then I'm like, oh, I'm talking over everybody's head. So convection is the lifting caused by heating of, you know, aerosols. Let's just say that. And an aerosol can be anything floating in the air, specks of dust. It could be you know, trace elements of either, you know, liquids, you know, all kinds of things. These are aerosols. So that's what we're talking about. Aerosols being sucked up because of heating, convection. Mm-hmm. And you know, there have been a lot of people who, you know, and they just keep coming. When I look at, you know, the science behind it, you know, aside from like, you know, what you just said, I'm gonna go to this is right here. In 2010, they were doing the cloud ionizers, oddly enough, in the UAE, and basically the World Meteorological Organization expert team on weather modification flew out to Abu Dhabi because these guys were saying that they were, you know, creating clouds out of nothing with cloud ionizers, and they shat all over, obviously.
Well, it's kind of like the William Reich Organite stuff. You've seen this, right?
Yeah, like the cloud busters and stuff like that.
Yeah. The ionization stuff doesn't seem to work as well, or at least it's like totally immeasurable what its are.
So this is what they actually. I keep backups of everything because, you know, they delete everything that I post on the website, and then they'll go and they'll petition it down off of archive.org. But this is their original statement. Most people don't even know that the WMO has a expert team on weather modification. I know like 4 or 5 of the members on there. They love it when they get an email from me. So this was the Wyoming Weather Modification Pilot Program, where they said cloud seeding produced a 3% increase in precipitation with a 28% probability this happened by chance. So this was the federal government in 2014 really trying to prove the efficacy of cloud seeding. They failed miserably, but Snowy followed after the Wyoming Weather Modification Pilot Program. Which I clearly did not include on this page because, you know, hey, what can I say? I'm biased. You know, I can admit that I'm biased. Okay. Agree to disagree.
All right.
This one's fascinating. And I think that it really goes to the heart of what we're talking about here is like the accuracy thing, that both geoengineering and weather modification are considered outside of the scope of control theory, that they are technically chaos theory. Like you're dealing with a chaotic, turbulent system, and that without, you know, very granular, you know, information on all the different levels of the atmosphere, that you're really not going to be able to make strong predictions on how a perturbation is going to affect an outcome. And I think that, you know, things like having radio signs literally released twice a day. I mean, we rely on balloons released 12 hours apart today. Is kind of shocking to me. I mean, I personally would say, why couldn't you put a drone, have it rising up and down the column 24 hours a day, reporting in real time so we can get better information? But of course they're cutting all that. But and I think this was from that, but you know, it's anyway, quantifying snowfall from orographic cloud seeding from the NAS 2020. Again, they're saying that, you know, understanding cloud seeding efficacy that for over half a century has been unanswered question for water managers. Anyway, I'm not going to beat this to death, but, you know, the Israel Water Authority stopped weather modification activities because they basically said, we really don't know how this is working. I'm curious what you think about this, that 30 milligrams of silver iodide under optimum conditions equals that of 1 atomic bomb. Irving Langmeyer said that.
30 milligrams? I would have to back out that math, but I'm not sure how you could get there. I assume that what he means is that the cumulative energy released from the latent heat release in freezing, where if you had 30 milligrams of silver iodide in a pure, large, super cold liquid cloud and got secondary ice formation after the initial nucleation, like if you had that, maybe you could release a lot of heat, but it wouldn't be as dense. It wouldn't be anything like an A bomb, right? It would just be relative heating. I'd have to do the math, but that seems very, very. That seems like the optimism about weather modification that people had in the 40s shining through, right? Like they thought.
Yeah, I mean, he was part of the atomic bomb committee as well. So I think that everything was in let's measure this in atomic bombs now. But what was it? It wasn't William Cotton. Father Ben Livingston. Ben Livingston was part of Project Storm Fury, and he made several claims very similarly that the amount of silver iodide they released into tropical systems, whether they be full-born hurricanes, a lot of the Project Storm Fury operations, they said, well, this was a complete failure, that's why NOAA quit doing it. Then you get the flip side of that, where the CIA were claiming that they were steering hurricanes into Cuba. So like, I find this really interesting, and a little birdie told me that there's a company out there that are attempting to steer hurricanes right now, but we're not going to talk about that today, but maybe another day very soon, like when hurricane season really kicks up, we'll do a little discussion about people currently modifying hurricanes. But I think that this is a fascinating situation, the whole chemtrail thing. And I saw you get like immediately you're in Tennessee, you're in Florida, and then all the chemtrailers came for you. What was that like? Did you see that coming? I'm just curious.
I thought when I started this company, I was pretty aware of the fact that would happen sooner rather than later. It happened even sooner than I thought it did, than I thought it would. But I'm a little bit heartbroken about it sometimes because, like I said, I don't think I'm a perfect guy, but I'm really trying to help. And most folks from like the chemtrail community, let's say, either want to burn me to death because they think I'm a witch, or something else to that effect. And I'm going to keep trying to talk to these people pretty earnestly and openly, even if they seem to hate me. Because you know what, I'll be transparent, right? Like, I'm a Thiel fellow. A lot of people are pretty skeptical of Peter Thiel by default, and by association, I'm then guilty of some abstract thing. But I'm gonna keep interacting with those people in good faith, because I think it's my responsibility to, and I shouldn't be running this company if I wasn't willing. Now that said, did you see the guy in Florida that was like the
doctor, the ex judge?
No, the Beatles impersonator.
Oh no, shit! I probably should have watched the whole thing.
There was a John Lennon impersonator that said something.
Wow.
Peace, love, and sunshine, and then called me an eco-terrorist. So,
well, as we say in the South, bless his heart.
Bless his heart.
Like, this is one of the things. Is like, I started out, being heavily critical of weather modification, very skeptical of, weather warfare. Like, one of the big problems I have with weather warfare is that, they created a weather warfare ban the year I was born, 1976. And they never created a way to actually catch anybody doing it, which is kind of stupid. If, just let's be real. It's very stupid. It's like banning murder, but then never creating a way to find somebody, catch a murderer.
Yeah.
Okay. Bans don't work. So we have laws, people break them. So weather warfare, in 2010 and 11, Mahmoud Ahmadinejad said that the European states were stealing Iran's rain. In 2018, Brigadier General Gholam Jalali from Iran said that Israel and other countries were stealing Iran's clouds. And then in around 2021, he got more specific, and he said that the UAE and Israel were stealing the clouds coming in and making the clouds barren entering in Iran. So is weather modification affecting that? Is that weather warfare? It sure does track with what's happened in the past. Well, really, we have no way to prove any of this. So that's it. It stays in the realm of conspiracy, because A, if they were going to do it, they damn sure wouldn't tell us about it. And B, just because there's a law says that, or a treaty they signed that says we won't do this, surely as hell doesn't mean they're not going to do it. They have a Geneva Convention. People break that shit all the time.
I think that the answer to that is kind of simple, right? It's like, these are complicated systems. We don't invest anything in the research and development of better weather sensing instrumentation or methodologies for identifying weather mod. We should do that. So if there is any malicious activity, or even if there is benevolent activity that we want to understand the consequences of better, like, let's just improve our radar network, improve like the methodology that we have for measuring precipitative outcomes, et cetera. That seems pretty straightforward to me. And that said, you mentioned like 2 radiosondes from like a handful of airports across the country every day. That is a ridiculously low rate of information and data gathering relative to what we're capable of in the 21st century. So let's invest more in that data collection, so that we can figure out what's going on.
Yeah, I fully agree with that. So I proposed an amendment to the NMOD treaty called the Environmental Modification Accountability Act. And in it, it's like a 2-part thing, that we have an international registry of atmospheric experimentation, something similar to the Weather Modification Reporting Act of 1972, but on a worldwide basis, because at this point, when you've got like the Malaysian, or, the Philippines, their Air Force, the Chinese, PLA, I mean, when you're talking about, the Russian military, they're not being transparent with anybody. Let's be real. They're not telling a soul. And when we're talking about they could be doing monumentally large weather modification activities, we would never know it, and we wouldn't be able to, have any say. There's no proof. Okay, so there's no way to even be critical of it, because somebody's immediately gonna say, "Put your fucking tinfoil hat on and shut up." So that and it's also kind of a black swan fallacy. Just because it happened in the past doesn't mean it's going to happen in the future. But at the same time, those who forget the past are doomed to repeat it. So that's kind of where I land on, the weather warfare aspect of things. But, just being able to get, transparency in America, and, where America leads, the world tends to follow.
Mm-hmm.
So I can see, your thoughts behind the whole dominoes falling in the East, leading to the West. And I do see, this is kind of a states' rights issue, where clearly the federal government has completely failed in, the demanding transparency. People have a very, clear need or necessity right now, especially we're in a solar maximum. This is just to be real honest, like, this is all going to peter out in about another year, just so you know. Like, nobody's going to give a fuck about any of this in literally a year and a half. Bet you money. This happened last in 2012, 13, and 14, solar maximum. People were losing their shit about all this. But they'll stop caring about chemtrails in 2 years tops. And then you'll be doing your thing, and nobody will care about what I'm saying or you're saying or any of this. It's sad but true. We're all predictable. So the thing about the chemtrails that drives me batshit crazy is that when I started out as a weather modification, activist and geoengineering, I want to ban geoengineering. I get all of these asshat, know-it-alls, keyboard warriors in the comment section telling me, well, geoengineering's happening every day over my house because I can see it. And I'm like, well, it's kind of geoengineering. It's definitely weather modification, because it was sunny and now it's cloudy.
Mm-hmm.
So that's weather modification. But they don't seem to understand the word intent. Okay? What is the intention behind this? Is this intentional or not? So this is really where I draw the line on it, that the chat, somebody got pissed off in the chat. Don't let the door hit you where the good Lord split you. Bye, Chuck. Oh, that wasn't Chuck. I'm not even going to repeat that. Oh, good Lord. So yeah, the chemtrail crowd, they came for me in the comments, and they're like, but my geoengineering, but they're intentionally doing this and they're intentionally doing that. But my Morgellons, my nanobots, my human blood, my ethylene dibromide. And then that really forced me to like look into this. I'm like, I don't really want to do this, but I'm going to have to look into it. Now I'm this freaking nerd who knows everything about cloud formation, you know, relative humidity and dew point depressions, reading radio signs and predicting contrail formation, and, you know, all of this stuff. Just, and one of my favorite videos on YouTube, you know, I'm going to have to, I'll text you this after though, after we get off there. It's called "No Amount of Evidence Will Ever Convince an Idiot." And the guy's basically singing a song about like 5G and, you know, EMF dangers and stuff like that. But, you know, he's like, I showed them the research papers and I showed them the documentation. And at the end of the day, they didn't care, you know, because, you know, all your carefully laid arguments can be easily ignored. And when we live in a, you know, cult of personality where people, you know, just they want something that reaffirms their beliefs. So they seek out, you know, confirmation bias. They don't want to, you know, confront people who think differently than them. So like I actively seek out people who think differently than me because, you know what, I might be wrong. And I don't want to mislead people. And I also don't want to be a fucking hypocrite. So I'm not going to sit here and tell you, you know, hey man, good luck. And I hope you control all the weather on the planet and you get to be a billionaire. And by the way, check in the mail, please. My address is on my website, Augustus. When you get filthy rich, you know, help a brother out. I live in the finest double wide the Illuminati ever paid for. So when you see them, tell them I need an update. But yeah, so I saw everybody coming for you with the chemtrails, and I'm going, you know, we really have this crisis of terminology. And so when I created the Chemtrail Facts website, you know, specifically, I created this section about what is a chemtrail. And I don't think people understand that, you know, whether it's geoengineering, weather modification, or, you know, directly spraying poisons. And a lot of this is misattribution, you know, like when you see this is a cloud seeding rack. This is a Weather Modification International, you know, Cessna plane, or is it a Beechcraft? I think it's a Beechcraft. Anyway, that's a flare rack. Okay. So this is similar to what, you know, Augustus was doing on July 2nd. I need a triple wide. Let's go chat. Hell yeah. Let's upgrade this. I need a triple wide. Y'all help me out on that one. Love you. Appreciate that. Yeah, but we tend to refer to people from the Dane Wigington crowd as Dane bread. It's a play on the word brain dead because they don't think a lot. And because they watch the dimming, they think that everything they're seeing is geoengineering when geoengineering does not create visible clouds. What you do does not create visible clouds. People do not understand the difference between seeing white lines coming from planes that are cirrus clouds and what, you know, weather modification is. Again, you know, it's all right here in just one infographic, but even simplifying it this much, they really don't understand it because they hear people saying these words like the Alex Joneses, you know, all the usual suspects, Dane Wigington. They hear him saying geoengineering is going on. It's all a secret government program. It's stratospheric aerosol injection. Meanwhile, if you fly a plane into the stratosphere, it does not create clouds. And this is like, you know, so they don't understand the terminology. They clearly don't understand the physics. And then when you have things that do make clouds, like, you know, this is an example of the military. This was from 1958, Dr. Florence Van Straten using carbon black dust to create cirrus clouds on demand. This has always been a thing. So there is some there that they have the potential to create clouds using liquid, you know, basically it's carbon black dust suspended in a liquid sprayed out of the back of a military aircraft. You can create clouds. That's the only technology I know of other than the rockets where you can create clouds. But a lot of people, you know, they stick to this right here. Contrails disappear, chemtrails stick around. And you are a chemtrailer. You are chemtrailing everybody. Since I have you here present right now, I want you to apologize to everybody on the planet for chemtrailing everybody and blocking out the sun.
I'm afraid that I can't do that.
I know you can't because you're not doing that.
Yeah. No, I mean, I happy to be doing cloud seeding rather than chemtrailing. But I'm gonna have to jump here in a sec, Jim.
Yeah,
so.
we need to wrap this up. I told you I wouldn't keep you long. I'm just having a giggle fest. You know, the chemtrail people, they really make it hard for us to have a conversation. And when we have a serious situation like this, you know, with what happened in Texas, I lived through Hurricane Hugo, and every hurricane comes along. You know, we saw it, you know, just recently, Helene and Milton. Everybody on the internet made all this money clickbaiting everybody, going, I know that these hurricanes were controlled by the Illuminati, the shadow government. They get to the lithium mines and stuff. So we're not having an honest discussion about what weather modification is. We're not really talking to the people, we're talking at them. Mm-hmm. So I do appreciate you coming on here and you know, addressing this head on. At the end of the day, the public, you're gonna form your opinions. I'm not here to change your opinion. Augustus can't change your opinion. At the end of the day, you know, there are statistics, there's a, you know, trail of meteorological information. My personal meteorologist was in chat earlier. He's still here, Jeff. And Jeff was a Navy meteorologist. We can go through it and we can look at it, and he'll be able to verify whether what you're saying is true. Let me get your flight number when you're done, and I'll show it to people just to like really stick it in and break it off. Because all of this stuff is tracked. You know, like we can go back and we can generally see if a large synoptic region was modified, it's going to stick out like a sore thumb. Mm-hmm. But anyway, I really appreciate you coming on such short notice, having a little bit of fun at the end with this. You know, I told you I wouldn't break your balls too bad, and you've been a gentleman about it and a good sport. Is there anything you want to say, you know, like wrap up, you know, tell anybody like, you know, what you got going on, where you planning on hitting next?
Yeah. Well, I guess first and foremost, right, I would just ask people to pray for everyone infected in Texas. We're doing the same here, and Rainmakers are going to be down in Texas helping with the relief efforts next week. You know, I hope to continue to be transparent about this stuff just so that we can study the weather more, figure out how to forecast better, figure out how to avoid flooding like we saw this past weekend, and know that cloud seeding isn't responsible provided we keep operating in a responsible manner. So there's all that to say. And then beyond that, you know, like you said, you're going to hold my feet to the fire on transparency and better regulation, and I'm going to go out to bat advocating for that as well. So I'll probably be in DC and around there trying to get more stringent reporting requirements through.
I think that it'll probably be really good for your business model, because if you're the first in, and all of these other companies, they've got a lot to lose if they don't get in on this as well. And then, you know, they're really going to have to put their money where their mouth is. So honestly, like whoever, you know, in a perfect capitalist society, he who has the best results wins. And right now, since we don't have a good measuring stick, you can't really show whether you're, you know, as good as you say you are. I tend to think you're probably better than most. And that's me just being, you know, impartial observer based on, you know, the technology you're using, the way you're going about it. I know all the other companies. So like, I think you got a leg up. I applaud you for being transparent. Thank you so much for coming on and doing this interview. Everybody check him out. Doricko. Yeah. So that I had it right to begin with. Doricko. So Augustus Doricko, it's Doricko on X. You can follow him there. Rainmaker.com is his website. You know, hey, you go dig in your weather apps, you know, you got the information. He's already posted all of his receipts on his wall. You're going to see a whole lot of people probably talking a whole lot of shit about him, and by extension me, but I wanted to hear it from the horse's mouth, and I applaud you for doing that, sir. God bless you, and you know, safe travels, and make it rain and do it safely, brother.
Thanks, man. Godspeed.
All right. Thank you guys for tuning in. This has been an interesting discussion. I've been waiting to have this for quite some time. If you guys are new to the channel, if you haven't ever been here before, go over to connect.climateviewer.com and subscribe to all the things. Many new things coming to the websites. Check out Climate Viewer Report on SUBSTACK and join our Telegram chat if you want to be part of the conversation. If you appreciated this, any of the content that I've done on my websites to this video, feel free to donate. If you don't, it's not going to kill me. And love you, mean it. Remember, guys, no more dehumanizing people. Like, we need to grow up as a society. So please use this information to attack ideas, not people.
Thanks, Jim.